GOP presidential candidate Nikki Haley is leaning heavily into the debate over transgender athletes in sports. Here she is Sunday, speaking at a town hall in Iowa.
Want to start with biological boys playing in girls' sports. That's one thing. The fact that we have gender pronoun classes in the military now. I mean, all of these things that are pushing what a small minority want on the majority of Americans, it's too much. It's too much. I mean, the idea that we have biological boys playing in girls' sports, it is the women's issue of our time. My daughter ran track in high school. I don't even know how I would have that conversation with her. How are we supposed to get our girls used to the fact that biological boys are in their locker rooms? And then we wonder why a third of our teenage girls seriously contemplated suicide last year? We should be growing strong girls, confident girls.
Haley's comment drew the ire of the trans community. Activist and journalist Erin Reed denounced the former senator's comments, writing, quote, "Not only is this a horrific argument that trans girls are driving cis girls to suicide, but I also recall watching debates in 18 state legislatures where Republicans did not care about suicide. One Republican even said she wouldn't do anything to save her suicidal daughter." Meanwhile, down in Florida, a judge blocked enforcement of the state's ban on gender-affirming care for adults and children, calling it an exercise in politics, not in good medicine. I also wanted to mention this poll that came out, published by PBS NewsHour, that asked Americans, do you support or oppose legislation that would prohibit gender transition-related medical care for minors? Now, interestingly, among all national adults, 66 opposed legislation that would prohibit gender-affirming care. 28% supported it. But what was so fascinating about this poll is when you broke out Democrats, Republicans, and independents, the numbers didn't change very much. Democrats, 69% opposed, Republicans, 70% opposed, independents, 64% opposed. But this really wasn't an ideological issue. So the question is Nikki Haley and others like Ron DeSantis who are really leaning into this particular line of attack? Ron DeSantis making this kind of woke fight the entire linchpin of his campaign. Is this going to be the galvanizing political issue that helps them in an electoral contest?
I agree with you on the banning. I don't support the banning of care, and I think it's possible for conservatives to overreach on this. But on what Nikki Haley was talking about there, I mean, I'm looking at a poll. 57% of American adults believe gender is based on sex assigned at birth. 53% say that gender is based on sex. 63% of adults believe gender is based on, 63% believe it's assigned at birth. A super majority of Americans don't want biological males competing in women's sports. Do I think it's having an effect on suicide rates? No, she probably shouldn't have said that.
Let's stay with that for a second. That's a huge claim.
Yeah,
she
says
there's a suicide problem with girls. Mm-hmm. That somehow it makes sense. Like, how can we be surprised that so many girls want to commit suicide when there are trans girls who want to be in locker rooms? How many trans athletes are there in the entire country?
Yeah, I think that claim, again, is not accurate, but I don't doubt that there have been cases where women feel uncomfortable because of situations in the locker room. I mean,
and we're going to blame that on the suicide rates of cis girls across the country?
Okay,
That's a significant claim.
Fair enough, which I agree is not accurate, but I have also, I've seen claims, the suicide argument is used all the time by activists on transgender issues. On their side, they say that they'll talk about how how language we use, not using right pronouns, is driving trans people to suicide and trans deaths and all of that kind of thing. So it has been used as a tactic on the other side.
Do you think it's the same thing to say people being bullying or mean or non-affirming to trans girls affects their mental health? I think that's the same as saying there's a handful, a few hundred or a few thousand of trans girls.
Affect the mental health of people who have to compete against biological males in the locker room, I would have agreed.
But this is right, but she didn't say that. She didn't say.
But trans people, not trans activists on transgender issues have also thrown the suicide.
No, they're arguing that words and actions directed at trans people that are negative, or that are bigoted, however you want to characterize it, affects their mental health. But me saying, Robby, I'm going to bully you. Robby, hang your tie, whatever. It's a different thing, I would argue. If you say that's affecting your mental health, there's a connection, there's a correlation between my words and your
statement. They're not just saying it's affecting their mental health. And if Nikki Haley had just said it's affecting their mental health, that would be a substantial
Right, but Nikki Haley, this is the story. The whole story is that Nikki Haley isn't complaining about.
You're making a comparison that you just came up with, but it's actually the exact same thing being said.
No, let me finish the analogy.
Okay.
You're saying the trans activists are doing this, are saying it's mean when Briahna says I don't like your tie, and that's causing me a mental health problem. And you can argue that that's overblown and that no one should be that sensitive about their tie, but that's the accusation that trans activists are making. What Nikki Haley is saying is that there's a trans boy trying to use a high school locker room somewhere in America, and that is making Robby Soave feel suicidal.
I mean, no, she's saying it's making the people in that locker room situation.
No, she's not. She took the entire category of girls in the United States who are suicidal and the broad trend of increased suicide rates and connected that to a very small number of trans female athletes that are in,
as I said, I don't think
locker rooms.
Suicide trends have been broadly affected by it. I do think it is an issue that Americans care about, where attitudes are not particularly divided. Also, locker rooms are an uncomfortable situation for tons of young people. Even take the trans issue out of the question. We should be for providing. Is it an arena for harassment and bullying of people of all genders? We should this should be very not controversial to say that there should be more safeguards put in place so that young people can have more privacy and feel more comfortable in locker rooms and bathrooms and facilities.
I think that's a non-controversial issue.
Why?
I was one of those who towel changed and nobody ever saw a peek of me in my high school.
No. We don't have full equality until teen girls are forced to disrobe and be naked in front of trans people.
Robby.
That's nonsense.
This is the point. Nikki Haley, first of all, I think she just doesn't sell it. She doesn't talk about it with anything that speaks to real conviction. But the idea is she's standing on stage, dedicating all of this time to kind of creepily and fetishistically going on and on about what children are doing in changing rooms. It is an interesting choice for anyone to make, especially someone like Nikki Haley, who seemed to at one point be positioning herself as kind of more like a reasonable, normal, conservative person.
Well, I think bringing suicide into it was very wrong. Other than that, I don't think the point was unreasonable. I don't think most people think the point was unreasonable.
Well, au contraire, I think the poll that I read earlier indicates quite the opposite. So she made. She and people like Ron DeSantis continue to make points about gender-affirming care.
But this is about sports teams and locker rooms accommodations, where that's very different from the legislation you're talking about.
Right, and Ron DeSantis supports the legislation that I'm talking about. So the question is
that's
whether...
That's not what you said. Why is she bringing that? That's not what she brought up there. She was talking about the locker room.
No, she brought up a whole host of things in that, and has specifically also brought up the medical care for kids as well. So that is... all of those things are on the table for these people. And so the question is, even if you didn't align with this study, even if you were the percentage of people who don't support even who would ban gender-affirming care for kids, is this something that you want to be the focus of a presidential campaign, the political focus? Is inflation still an issue? Are you still having issues with your housing costs? What is the Republican plan to address healthcare costs? What is is Nikki Haley or any other Republican actually going to commit to cutting military funding? Or Democrat, by the way, but we're talking about the Republican candidates right now. This is the question, and I think why so many Americans, per our earlier segment, are racing away from both political parties, because they're having these siloed conversations that have nothing to do with what anybody actually wants politicians to do. They want them to get out of their families, get out of their lives, stop trying to raise their children for them, stop trying to censor the internet on the basis of their children need the internet censored, and to get back to the work of governing and trying to make the economy better and the lives of everyday Americans economically richer.
Well, sure, and I can find the culture war. The culture war can get distracting, or everybody complaining about everything having to do with wokeness, but I mean, what happens in your kid's school is something that matters to a lot of Americans, regardless of political affiliation. And I don't think this is quite this is not an issue that people care about, or this is really trivial or something, but I guess we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. All right.
Tomorrow on Rising. We've been talking for so long. I didn't even know that was our last segment. Doesn't it feel like we did like 18 segments today?
Yeah, we're rocking and rolling today.
We're rocking and rolling. Well, tomorrow we'll be very excited to be joined by Tara Reade on this show. You won't want to miss that. Tara Reade, of course, someone who accused Joe Biden of sexual misconduct, and the news with her recently was that she has relocated to Russia. We talked about that on the show and how the mainstream media responded to that. We'll be able to talk to her on the show tomorrow.
Be sure to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss any content. For those of you who prefer to listen while you're on the move, we are now available anywhere you listen to podcasts.
Bye-bye.
Bye.